Number 10. Drill Disaster. In September 2019, 25-year-old Anna Maluchek clocked in for work at a metal parts factory in West Midlands, England. It was a pretty normal day for the most part, but things took a horrific turn a couple hours into her shift. Anna lost focus thanks to the loud noises the machines around her were making, and in the midst of the hustle and bustle of the factory, she didn't realize her hair, which was tied in a ponytail, had started to wrap itself around a rotating drill. By the time Anna realized what was even happening, it was too late. Her hair was completely stuck inside the machine, and as she cried out for help, no one responded since the factory was just that loud. In a final, desperate attempt at escaping, the 25-year-old grabbed her ponytail and tried to literally rip her hair out. At this point, she didn't care about damaging it, she simply wanted it to get out, but the force of the machine was too strong and Anna didn't have enough strength. Eventually, the drill started to pull not only Anna's hair, but her entire scalp too. Anna said that she had to listen in horror helplessly to the sound of her skin getting ripped from her scalp. It didn't take long for her to pass out, but miraculously, she made it out of the machine alive. After the incident, Anna had to go through 9 separate surgeries and even had to get her right ear amputated. The factory was fined over £62,000 for endangering Anna, but the victim herself didn't get a penny. Number 9. Hole in the Skull. Early one morning on May 6, 2018, 38-year-old Brenda McLaughlin was found lying unconscious on the side of the road in Tyrone, Northern Ireland, with a blood pool around her head. The police that found her took her to a nearby hospital where Brenda slowly recovered and explained the gruesome details of what had happened to her. Earlier that day at 2 a.m., Brenda had been partying in a nightclub called Ruby's, which was popular among the town's LGBTQ+ community. Brenda, who was also a part of this group, was violently attacked by a teenage boy as he walked outside the club to get some fresh air. She claimed that the boy used a cordless drill to strike her, putting a bloody hole in her head. Brenda also said that he was likely very homophobic. Soon after the attack, the victim started having seizures and popping in and out of consciousness, all while nobody bothered to help her. Closed-circuit television footage from before the victim was found showed the accused holding the drill and playing around with it as if it were a gun. The police eventually arrested a 17-year-old boy a short distance from the club just a few hours later. The unnamed juvenile was charged with having an offensive weapon, causing grievous bodily harm to Brenda, and stealing a power drill owned by the nightclub, but he denied being homophobic. Since the accused was just a juvenile, no further details were released to the public. Number 8. Bad Hair Day. In February 2021, Umida Nazarova, a 21-year-old woman from Borisov, Belarus, was at a Svarmet factory applying for a job opening. Nazarova was 7 weeks pregnant at the time and was desperate to get a job to pay for her child's future well-being. The factory mainly produced wires and electrodes, and for the most part, Nazarova's interview went off without a hitch. She was offered a tour of the factory before her first shift, which she gladly accepted, but this was where things started to go downhill for the young woman. Since Nazarova was only on a tour of the factory, she wasn't wearing any of the proper protective gear. After getting close to one of the machines to get a better view of how it worked, the woman's long brown hair suddenly got caught in the cogs, leaving her trapped and unable to escape. To make things worse, the employee giving Nazarova the tour had stepped away for a minute to make a note of something, but as soon as she turned around to attend to Nazarova, the young woman was already lying on the floor lifeless. According to reports, the woman's hair was completely tangled up in the machine, and she may have suffered critical damage to her skull. By the time the ambulance got to the scene, 21-year-old Umida Nazarova was dead. The factory worker who gave the tour was given an undisclosed sentence by the Belarusian police for, quote, failing to fulfill her official duties due to the dishonest and negligent attitude and causing the death of a person. The victim's mother told the media that she simply, quote, wanted to celebrate her wedding and collect a grandson or granddaughter from the hospital. Not this. This is not what I wanted for my child. This job interview turned into every parent's worst nightmare. Number 7. Chainsaw Murder. On June 21, 2018, 29-year-old Maria Jimenez Rodriguez went missing after failing to pick up her daughter, 4-year-old Destiny Jimenez, from their neighbor's house. Shortly before her disappearance, Maria had texted her sister, Gloria Jimenez, saying she was getting chased by 3, quote, white or Hispanic men. This was the last time anyone would hear from her. But Gloria doesn't believe it was actually Maria that sent the text. According to her, the person who chatted with her on the phone referred to Maria's daughter as Des, which was a nickname the missing woman never used, not once. Instead, this name was often used by Maria's boyfriend, 47-year-old Eric Fardell Arsenault. Gloria also said that her sister would have likely called 911 instead of her if she was actually in trouble and had access to a cell phone. Arsenault, the boyfriend, claimed that he hadn't seen Maria since the day before the incident. The man had a history of violent acts, felony convictions, and had even been accused by his grown daughter from a previous relationship of child abuse. Police soon started to gather evidence while treating Arsenault as the prime suspect. They managed to find closed-circuit television footage of Arsenault entering a Home Depot to buy a chainsaw. Phone data showed both Arsenault and Jimenez together in the suspect's home the day she disappeared. Police were now certain that Arsenault had used the chainsaw to dismember his girlfriend and hide her body. But once police obtained an arrest warrant for Arsenault, who up until then claimed to be innocent, the man had already fled town. As of 2022, neither the remains of Maria Jimenez nor the whereabouts of her boyfriend and likely murderer Eric Arsenault are known. There is currently a $5,000 reward for any pertinent information that could lead to his arrest. Have you ever used a chainsaw? Tell us about it in the comments below and hit that subscribe button while you're at it. Number 6. Hammer Karen. In June 2020, LA resident Eddie Perez, who was on vacation in Miami at the time, got a video on his phone from his home showing a girl next to his car. The video showed a middle-aged woman named Susan telling two men placed behind the camera to, quote, get the F out of her neighborhood. The men recording, who happened to be Hispanic, were also told to, quote, go back to Mexico. As the woman continued to blurt out racial orders and insults at the men, she began smashing Perez's parked car with a hammer. Another video showed the same person getting into a fight with yet another woman over a garden hose. The man whose car was smashed later put the videos up on his Twitter account, saying he was just trying to enjoy his vacation, but an old racist woman had to smash up his car with a hammer. According to reports, the woman was arrested by the LAPD over property damage on June 10, 2020, but just one day later she was released thanks to the high risk of COVID in jail. Police did not continue pursuing the case after this, but Eddie Perez started a GoFundMe to help pay for his vehicle's repairs. He received over $11,000 from kind strangers since the damages were not covered by his insurance. Number 5. Nail Gun. In October 2009, 27-year-old Chen Liu went missing in Sydney, Australia. Liu was an immigrant who moved to Australia from China for the chance at a better life back in 2000. Almost a month after his disappearance on November 1, 2009, his body was found by two young boys in a body of water near Sydney's Moorshead Drive. Liu's remains were wrapped using plastic, wires, and even an extension cord. Despite being far away from him, the boys could smell Liu's decomposing body from a distance. They told their parents the horrific news and quickly called the police. Once authorities retrieved and identified the body, they conducted an autopsy. Inspector Newham of the Sydney Police said that Liu's skull had numerous nails in it. There were a total of 37 stuck inside his head, leading police to believe that the literal nail gun might be the murder weapon used. As of 2022, this murder case remains unsolved, and the Sydney Police have failed to make even a single arrest related to Liu's murder. It's unlikely that this murder case is high on their priority list anymore, so it's probable that the case will never get solved unless the murderer themselves confesses. Number 4. Nurse with a Screwdriver. On March 4, 2017, a Coachella Valley woman named Tiger Jackson had just recently broken off her 7-month-long relationship with 31-year-old ex-nurse Eric Maciel. Their connection was abusive, and Jackson decided that she wasn't going to put up with Maciel's antics anymore. That day, she decided to visit his home one last time with a friend to pack up the rest of her belongings. But as soon as Jackson got there, she was immediately greeted by her ex standing in the doorway. He tried to convince her not to leave, but once he was so sure she wouldn't change her mind, he pulled out a screwdriver and mercilessly stabbed Jackson over and over again. Maciel then turned toward Jackson's friend and went after her too, but this gave Jackson the opportunity to escape to the backyard. But before she could even leave the house, she was grabbed by Maciel once again. This time, she was stabbed in the throat as well. The attack was thankfully stopped by a mailman outside who heard the commotion and climbed onto the attacker's back to subdue him. Over half of Jackson's face was paralyzed, and she received many other injuries. Luckily, both she and her friend survived, and Eric Maciel was arrested not long after. He was convicted of 2 counts of attempted voluntary manslaughter and sentenced to life in prison with a slim possibility of parole. Number 3. Home invasion with a drill. In February 2019, an unnamed man was asleep at his home in Winnipeg, Canada, when the house was suddenly invaded by 4 burglars. Once they noticed the man had woken up due to the noise, 2 of the invaders, 32-year-old Richard Thomas Ponyting and 31-year-old Connie Mitchell Williams, attacked him with a power drill they had stolen from him. The homeowner was able to block the initial attack, but it injured his upper body. After that, one of the suspects came at the man again and left him in a critical state. While he was passed out, the thieves managed to escape after stealing a few valuables. Ponytail and Williams were later arrested by the Winnipeg police the day after and charged with breaking and entering to commit a robbery and aggravated assault. The other two invaders remain at large. Number 2. Unfortunate accident. In September 2019, ambulances rushed to a factory in New South Wales, Australia to respond to one of the most gruesome workplace accidents in the state's history. That day, an unnamed 18-year-old man was just working at the factory on the outskirts of Sydney, but somewhere along the line, his loose pants got stuck inside a conveyor belt. As he desperately tried to free himself, he only wound up closer and closer to the industrial machine, all while no one was there to hear his cries for help. Eventually, not only did the man's pants get torn off, but his genitals also got stuck inside the belt's mechanism. To prevent any further damage, the entire belt was sawed off by paramedics, and the man was taken to the hospital. All the while, the machine was still attached to his genitals. Later, at the hospital, it was removed under safer conditions. The victim received several lacerations on his damaged goods, but thankfully there was no permanent damage done. His condition stabilized throughout the following day, and he was shortly discharged from the hospital. The incident is under investigation by the Safe NSW department in Sydney, and it's expected the worker may get some sort of settlement out of this embarrassing and painful debacle. Number 1. Woodchipper murder. On November 19, 1986, a 39-year-old Danish flight attendant named Helly Crafts was supposed to meet her in-laws in Newtown, Connecticut with her husband, Eastern Airlines pilot Richard Crafts. But when Richard got to his sister's house, Helly was nowhere to be seen. He came up with all sorts of excuses for her absence, but after weeks had passed and no one had heard from her, friends started to worry for her well-being. Richard was known for having anger management problems, and the way he was brushing off his wife's sudden disappearance worried the couple's loved ones even more. On December 1st of that year, Keith Mayo, a private investigator that had been hired by Helly before the disappearance, reported her as a missing person. Helly hired Mayo because she believed her husband was having an affair. The investigator not only managed to confirm her suspicions, but he also captured picture evidence of Richard kissing another woman. Mayo worked closely with the police to investigate Richard's behavior, and eventually the cops managed to get warrants to search his house, call logs, and credit card information. They found out that Richard had purchased a chainsaw, freezer, and had rented out a wood chipper a day before Helly disappeared. They did not find any of these items inside his house, but after some searching, police managed to locate a chainsaw inside a frozen lake near Richard's home. The chainsaw contained traces of blood that was the same type as Helly's. After some interviews, a nearby snowplower confirmed that he witnessed Richard using the wood chipper during a snowstorm on November 19th, the day Helly had gone missing. He pinpointed the exact location Richard was seen using the machine, and there, police found pieces of metal, wood, and sprinkled among them were the remains of Helly Crafts. The investigation determined that she had been chopped up by the chainsaw and then put through a wood chipper to hide the murder evidence. In 1988, Richard Crafts was convicted of murder by Connecticut courts. It was the first murder conviction in the state's history without the presence of a human body. He was sentenced to 50 years in prison, although he was released early in 2020. Thanks for watching. Which of these events was the worst in your opinion? What's the most dangerous power tool you've ever used? Tell us in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe. See you next time on The Bad Badger.